Good afternoon, everybody. We'll bring the Committee of the Whole meeting together for February the 7th, 2025. Like to acknowledge the traditional territory of our neighbors and Treaty 8 partners of the Fort Nelson First Nation and the Prophet River First Nation. We further recognize the rights provided in our treaty, and we celebrate the contributions and enduring presence of the Métis people in our region. Please be advised that today's meeting is available to the public to attend virtually, as being streamed and recorded. Are there any staff additions? Council, any additions? No? Okay. Is there any public that wish to comment on today's agenda? Seeing none, everybody's okay with the agenda the way it is? Okay. So that brings us right straight to the to the meat of the matter today, the delegations. And so Representatives Colton Kersop from McElhaney is here to talk to us about our draft OCP. So welcome, Colton, and thanks for all the work that you and the committee have been doing on this. It's a monumental task, I realize for sure. So the floor is yours, I think, unless staff has something to say before.
Sure, I could just provide some information about where we are at with this project.
Okay, thank you very much.
So yes, good afternoon, everyone. We're here today to provide an update on this official community plan project. We have done a significant progress on this project, including the phase we are at, which is the draft OCP, which incorporates the feedback from the staff as well as the advisory committee members. So this is going to be an opportunity for council to provide feedback on this draft OCP for today before we take it out for the public engagement, which is scheduled for the end of the month, February. And just a heads up regarding the public engagement, we are finalizing the advertisement materials related to the public engagement, and I believe it would be ready to be released in a couple of days. Yeah, that said, I would like to now pass it to Colton to provide detailed information about the content of the draft OCP.
Thanks, Rada. Sorry for jumping right into it. And
That's all
yeah,
right.
okay. Welcome,
No
Colton.
problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Could I have the ability to share my screen, please? Yeah, when I try, it says host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Yeah.
All right, there we go. It's coming. Just a moment, and I'll get it all set up here. All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
fantastic. I never know what's going on the other side. So thanks very much, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. And as Rada said, we wanted to walk you through the draft, hear your feedback, and we do have time to integrate changes so that there's an opportunity for your feedback to be reflected. But we do hope to undertake community engagement in the last week of February. So I'll just get into the slideshow here. Our outline for the presentation is intended to cover just the process, like how we came up with this OCP, give you a sense of what's new, explain some of the user-friendly features that we've added into this document, and then just an overview of sort of how it's intended to work and play. And then we'll talk about some of those next steps and get into your questions and feedback. So in terms of how we drafted this document, you'll recall that the project started back in late 2023 with a technical review of the current document and some recommendations on how, some new best practices could be integrated. We had a very thorough and engaging public engagement process where we gathered feedback on the current vision and principles of your OCP and established what were current community priorities and values. through that engagement process. Your current OCP has some very excellent content in it, and so I would not suggest that this is a complete or wholesale revolution or rewrite. It's actually it's more of a refinement, and so it's built on that fantastic existing vision around being a complete community, which is now a buzzword and a very common trend in planning. So you guys started out ahead of the game, and the rest of the world is catching up to you. So after that engagement process, the McElhaney team prepared our first draft of the OCP, which was provided to staff for their review, their comments, and directions. We had a number of meetings with them where they asked us questions about certain things that they saw, and we made refinements, and they gave us direction on what they liked about that draft and what needed to be changed. So after getting that feedback, we went away and prepared a second draft of the document and integrated new content to address their feedback. And at that point, we re-engaged the Project Advisory Committee, which has been a super helpful committee. They helped us also in advance of our first round of public engagement to pick methods of engagement that were appropriate for the community and for being in Fort Nelson. But we had 4 meetings with the Project Advisory Committee to carefully walk through every page in the document. So that was a page-by-page review starting at the front, working our way through the document right to the end. So that brought us to the third draft, which incorporated the advice of the Project Advisory Committee, and that's the draft that's in front of you today. And so as we move through the document and the presentation today, we have that opportunity to integrate additional refinements from council before we take it out to any public engagement. So in terms of the new content, we have strived to not end up with a longer document. So the current OCP with all the maps is 101 pages long. We're at 98 pages, but that also includes the community profile, which is not a mandatory component of the OCP. So there is still an opportunity to leave it in there as an appendices or to pull it out and have it as a standalone document. If we did that, the length reduces down to 71 pages. So that's kind of an overview of like, you know, how much content there is. And again, our mission was to try and bring a little bit more user friendliness and organization to the document. So we started with that updated vision statement and 10 guiding principles. We then looked at all of the existing 17 land use designations and consolidated them to 13. We found some efficiencies, which I'll explain further in the presentation. And we added one new development permit area on how to manage development if there's a desire for it to be on steep slopes. There is now a process that staff can go through to make sure that that development is done in a safe manner. So that's one new development permit area on development on steep slopes. The OCP also has an implementation section that's a little bit more lengthy than the previous one, and that includes a table for short and medium long-term actions. And that table is empty right now because we would like to work with administration, the Project Advisory Committee, and council to figure out what are the right implementation actions to show up in that table. And our work program has always identified that as happening after the second round of engagement so that we've got good input from all angles, whether it's from administration, the PAC, or the public before we make that list. We've also made sure that this OCP meets all the Local Government Area Act requirements. So it's, from our perspective, fully compliant. And we also, as a function of that compliance, reference, you know, the interim housing needs report requirements. And we include a section on how to use the document so that users can actually read that and be like, okay, I get it. So one of the ingredients to our user-friendly approach was to use color-coded corners at the bottom right-hand side of each document page. And so they're shown on screen. There's a bit of a rainbow there. And so each section has a color coding. And this is useful potentially for yourselves or potentially for staff. You know, I think one of the most frequently used sections is probably the land use designation. So you can immediately remember, I just need to go to the gold section. Or if you're looking for the implementation list, you can go to that brick colored section. So that's just one of the nicer things that we thought would help with navigating the document. In terms of the vision statement, I think I touched on this at the beginning of the presentation. We wanted to uplift and center the existing vision in your current OCP, which is to be a complete community. We've learned through all of our process to date that, you know, it's obviously super important for Fort Nelson and the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality to provide its residents with the full range of services that they can, knowing that it's a very important center of a very big region. So we've tried to uplift and really emphasize that the vision for this OCP is for the heart of the Northern Rockies to retain its complete community status and continue to center that as a goal, as its North Star, as you work forward in the next 20 years. So underneath that vision, we have 10 principles, and these were created by thoughtfully reviewing, updating, and consolidating the good principles from your existing OCP. So the 5 principles on this slide represent the cultural, economic, agricultural, environmental, and housing principles that underpin the plan. And on this slide, the next 5 principles, you know, represent efficient and effective infrastructure, good municipal management, health and well-being of the municipality, the imperative to address climate change and sustainability, also to continue to emphasize transportation, mobility and access through the region and in the Fort Nelson area, and the strong recreational foundations in the Northern Rockies Regional Municipality. In terms of the land use designations, we worked to look for some opportunities for simplification and refinement of the land use designations. This allowed us to reduce the number of them from 17 to 13. And because we've done that, we've actually slightly broadened the designations and worked to provide a flexible approach to development. And the intent of this is to make sure that you get good mileage out of your plan, and so you can entertain a wider variety of activities within each land use designation. These are intended to be positioned as open for business designations that simplify the approach to accepting the use of more, a broader range of zoning options can be used in each designation in the municipality as a result of this process. And then just to sort of highlight where we gained some of those efficiencies, this slide shows how we were able to take the former highway commercial designation and consolidate it with the gateway commercial designation. So now your highway land use designation is labeled gateway commercial, and it provides still all of the full range of commercial activities along the highway. And then with the recreational designation, the new parks land use designation simplifies what used to be 2 designations, which was major parks and outdoor recreation designations. So there were a lot of similarities between those two. So a consolidation was fairly easy to accomplish. And then within the agriculture designation, there used to be 2 designations there. There used to be the small holdings and the large holdings agricultural designation. And so because you have tools in your zoning bylaw to manage the size and scale of agricultural operations, only 1 designation for agriculture is required. And then last of all, the agricultural land reserve and the sand and gravel designation replaces the former resource conservation designation. So there's a little bit of efficiency gain there as well. In terms of the policy structure, we've taken a consistent approach throughout the document. And again, this is largely built on what we saw in your existing OCP. So each section has a brief introduction. Then it has an alphabetized list of objectives for that section, and then a numeric list of policies. And everything has been numbered and alphabetized so that there's a consistent way for your staff or council reports to actually reference every single thing that's in your document. If you're looking at a development application, you can say, you know, per section 4.2, objective A, or policy 4.2.1, you know, this is either in alignment and we support this this rezoning application or this development permit. So it's easy for you to track where and when in the document a relevant citation is. In terms of the LGA requirements, the OCP update has added content to address the evolution of the Local Government Act. So that includes new content on housing and housing needs, some new content on environmental protection, climate resilience and hazards, some new content around transportation, and also just some updates to make sure that all the sand and gravel deposits were mapped and that there's some policy references to those. The OCP also contains some optional content that's enabled by the LGA, and much of that is contained in the community, culture, and social well-being section of the OCP. In terms of development permit areas, your existing OCP had the 4 that are on screen, and the 5th one is the new one. So the intent of this one is that if your staff are looking at a development on a particular parcel and the DPA map shows the red steep slopes on that parcel, they can look at that and they can have the flexibility to say, okay, well, as long as the development is outside of the red zone, you're going to be okay. But if your development footprint is in the red zone, now your staff have the tool, the authority to ask for a geotechnical engineer to take a look at this and say that this is designed appropriately to be cited here. Or they can, through that process, the applicant might get feedback from the geotechnical engineer that is probably not a stable enough slope to withstand development. And so they would advise them to not proceed any further. And so that is contained in Schedule D of the draft OCP. In terms of implementation tools, we added a section in here just to describe how plan amendments would be processed. This gives clarity to applicants and staff and council on what to look for when a plan amendment application is made. And this gives your staff confidence to say, these are the things you need to do if you're looking to amend the OCP. So you have consistent process. There's a section that explains the purpose and intent of temporary use permits and development variance permits. So again, this intent of this section is to inform the reader, developer, resident, staff, and council when these permits are needed, and to give you a good consistent basis for reviewing those as they come forward over time. We also provide some links to more information that can be found on the municipality's website, and also reference relevant documents that need to be reviewed as you make permit applications. And so again, the goal of that is really just to help the reader with the necessary tools and resource for making applications and advancing development in the region. In terms of the actions table, as I mentioned, we're keeping this blank for now because we have a process where we'd like to work with you to identify what are the key actions, what are the short-term, medium-term, and long-term objectives that you want to see advanced on paper, at least. This can help you with capital and operational budget planning and advocacy. It could also help you with grant applications, because you can say to the province, you know, our residents and our council has approved this list of priorities. So we'll be working through that process with you in the coming months. In terms of our next steps, like I mentioned, we're looking forward to hearing your feedback, making some changes if necessary before we advance to some further engagement. And then we'll post-engagement also provide you with some feedback around what we heard, what we might need to refine, make that next round of changes to the draft. And then that will be available for interdepartmental and legal review and the referral process. There'll be some refinements to address any feedback from that process. And then it's over to you for the council approvals and endorsement process. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you about any questions and observations that you might have.
Sorry about that. My mic wasn't on, Colton. Thank you very much for your presentation. And it was obviously at a very high level because we don't have the document sitting in front of us. I do have a few questions, but I would ask if council has questions and allow them to ask the questions first. So anybody? Okay, go ahead, please, Lorraine.
Yeah, thanks. So I was on the steering committee, so I just want to congratulate staff and Colton and the rest of the committee for all of the work that they put into this. Like 4 meetings and a line by line description doesn't really explain to council how in depth this whole plan was reviewed by the steering committee. And there was such great discussion. The committee was really involved. So there was a lot of revision. And so just really want to appreciate the grace with which Colton and the staff took that feedback and came back with the revised document. So yeah, just wanted to start. I only have one question. And under the OCP review overview, sorry, the 10 principles, number 2, it says foster economic diversification that supports local community needs and provides a range of employment options for all residents within the OCP area, supporting the regional economy and resource sector, and upholds shared responsibilities under Treaty 8. So just looking for a little clarification as to what do we mean by that statement?
Sure, certainly. Thanks, Councillor Gerwing. I think that really what we're after there is that, you know, the importance of applications that support a diverse economy are important in your region. So whether that's tourism, you know, we don't mention that by name. We don't necessarily mention hospitality. We do mention the resource sector because it's obviously like such a significant sector in the region. But I think it really was meant to get at that. I think the tail end of that principle referencing Treaty 8 actually may be extraneous to that principle, because the principle above it, I'm just looking at the list on my other screen here, speaks to the Treaty 8 content, as well as, you know, honoring and respecting Indigenous heritage and culture, as well as other, you know, cultural diversity aspects, as well as heritage in the region. So that might be a sort of a trailing component of it, but it's really just a principle that helps you. If you've got a development application in front of you, you can always say, like, you know, does this actually foster economic diversification in our community? It might not be the typical kind of development that we're used to seeing, but if you can pin it back to that principle, then it certainly might be worth further support and acknowledgement.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I should have just expanded a little bit. The first part of that whole sentence made sense to me, but the part that didn't make sense was uphold shared responsibilities under Treaty 8. I was just looking for some clarification because I don't know what the shared responsibilities are. Anybody reading this would then have to go to the Treaty 8 and try to determine what those shared responsibilities are. So yeah, that I'm just concerned with that last add-on.
So Counselor, I would take that as good direction to us, just to eliminate that content at the end. And as I said, I don't think that there was any, I think it was an unintentional holdover from our process of working through some revisions to the principles, and I think it's a good catch.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Counselor Souls,
If
please.
I can just add to that, one of the, in reading over these 10 principles, I thought that the first two, actually both mentioning Treaty 8 was actually fitting based on the content of what we were looking at. But I realized that the second point, the diversification of jobs and employment and industry and so on, a lot of that does, I realize in my mind, it does actually get outside of our small scale OCP, but it was part of the old OCP that was the whole regional OCP. And so I just see that the first principle in number 1 references the cultural heritage and so on part of our relationship in Treaty 8 as a part of it, but it doesn't actually touch on the larger things of industry and regional things. So it may not belong in here because of the smaller scale of our OCP relative to the one we had before, but I still would like to see some kind of linkage. When I read this second point, I'll tell you where my mind goes. The reason why it's important that we, in fostering, I'll use agriculture or other industrial things, is that our relationship in the Treaty 8 is actually a key to having access and involvement in many of the industrial. There's a direct relationship that's needed in order to have access, because there's notice that we're overlaying an agreement to work together over top of a existing land use policy that the First Nations have as well. So it's relevant to make that connection somewhere.
Thank you. Comments, Colton, or just took it under advisement with respect to Councillor Souls' comment?
I guess I'm just curious if we're removing that reference to Treaty 8, does that present a concern to Councillor Souls, or are you happy that the first principle references Treaty 8?
I'm happy that it references it in first one. If just notice in the first one, Treaty 8 territory, by celebrating and uplifting heritage, cultural diversity, mutual respect, meaningful dialogue, and it kind of talks about relational things, and regional oversight or industry, or it doesn't, if that first point referenced the economic well-being of our community as well as the cultural in that statement about Treaty 8, then I would happily see the second one disappear.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I think we can work on an alternative there that integrates the exact wording that you mentioned, economic well-being in Principle 1, and then we can avoid the duplicate reference to Treaty 8 in Principle 2.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. So I had thoughts similarly along those veins, and I was fine with either adding the benefits of the treaty, which I think is what you're talking about, the shared access to the land, as long as it didn't negatively impact the rights of the First Nation. So and I thought that last statement was really just talking about the First Nation portion, rather than recognizing the benefits of the treaty, which is shared access to the land. So I like Councillor Souls and your idea, Colton, of adding the idea of economic development in the first one and then eliminating it. I think it's better than adding the benefit piece that I had thought would sort of cover off that two-sided nature of the treaty. The other thing is that I've got a few questions around the principles and the vision statement, because correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this document goes back to 2009, 2011, and then it was updated again to some degree in 2016 or 17. Is that correct? No?
Yeah, that sounds, I think it does date from, maybe administration can take that question.
Sorry, I was saying 2011 was the last time the previous document was updated.
Right, so it's quite old with respect to the vision, and these
Right.
still applicable,
Mhm.
but I think there's been some things that have happened, and are generally happening. And we didn't actually finish our own strat planning process, right? We got totally derailed. Like we really started it well, and I think we got kind of derailed with the fires and everything that was happening in 2023, and we just haven't ever got back to it. But there's a few things and for me, these principles, I think staff will use, and you will use, Colton, when we get to the end and the implementation bit, right? And you're going to use these guiding principles to try to figure out how to put words around the action plans. And so a few words here are important to the overall process at the end. So a couple of things so I just preface my statements there, and this is open, I hope, to all of us to consider these words. The first one, there's a big move to actually celebrate the treaty itself, right? And so if we could add the words, be a community, or in this sentence, be a community that honors its place with Treaty 8 territory and celebrating the treaty and uplifting Indigenous. And I think it goes to what's happening generally, for sure, at the leadership group, in celebrating the treaty itself and trying to make more people understand what it's about. And I think that will move forward over the next 5 to 10 years, that this OCP will be recognized for. So I have that comment. We already talked about the second one. Under 4, ensure properties and landscaping are protected from flooding, wildlife, forest fire risk, and other event. That's a very lofty goal, and to ensure that it happens is a high bar, as we've learned from last year and the things that have been happening with the wildfires around us. And so I'm just worried that the word ensure is a little high, and for sure we should be promoting that, and that's what we're doing with our committee. That's what we're doing with Fire Smart in the region. And so I'm just thinking that ensure is maybe promote is too soft, but is there a word in the middle there that says we want to place an emphasis on it, but we can't really ensure that it's going to happen? Sorry? Strive for it. Yeah, so maybe you guys can think of words that are better. I don't intend to wordsmith it. I'm just trying to get the idea out there that I think it might be a high bar for us to actually achieve. Please.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
I kind of like the word ensure because it lends credibility to possible bylaw revisions in terms of fire smarting and other environmental hazards that have just slipped my mind right now. But you know what I mean? It's like, I understand that it's a high bar, but I think at this point in time, I'm willing to support a high bar. It doesn't mean that if we don't make it, like every property isn't safe from wildfire, it doesn't mean that it's a failure. It just means that this is what we are working towards, right? We want to ensure that properties are safeguarded in this way. And just to repeat that, I think that gives us the ability to enact new bylaws or to beef up bylaws that actually help us to get there.
I agree that could still be done with a word that's not quite so definitive, I suppose. So maybe we consider it. I mean, we can think about it later, right? But maybe we just consider that, and because I can see people using it against us if their properties are not protected and they burn. But and also a lot of complaints from people who want to see something happening on private property that's not theirs. I can see it creating issues for us in the future. But anyway, that was the concern I had with those words, and hopefully we can. I had the same basic wordsmithing idea under 8, where it talks about prioritizing energy efficiency and water conservation solutions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to become an increasingly sufficient. And again, I think prioritize is pretty strong. Does it become does that mean it's our first priority, or is it somewhere in the continuum of priorities? You know, I think promoting it, and it's definitely a goal that we want to achieve. I just wonder about the actual word prioritize it. In today's world, we've got a lot of things going on with respect to this particular principle. Again, is prioritize might be too strong, and promote might be not strong enough. So I'd like to see us consider some different words around that one. And then moving backwards, or I guess up one more level to the vision statement itself. And I think it's good, but in my world, in my life, safety is a big thing, and particularly with things that are going on right now in our community with respect to the RCMP and you know, unfortunately, some of the violence that's happening in our community. You know, I think part of our vision statement should include the word safety. And you know, and I just wordsmithed it to be, you know, the word would be to be a safe and thriving service center, on and on and on. So it just puts that word safety into the vision statement as something that we have, you know, it's a visionary statement that we want to ensure that everybody understands that safety is as important to us as thriving. So maybe if we can put that in and have a discussion, or at least put it out to the public to see if they're, you know, if they agree with that type of vision. Only because we haven't finished our own yet. Yeah. And was there anything else? I think those were the ones. I mean, I haven't read the actual document itself, and for sure, you know, do we want to get a wordsmithing document about it all? No, because you guys have done that. You guys have done that already, and I certainly, you know, we've thanked staff, and we've thanked the contractor, and I certainly want to thank both of you for participating, because it is a monumental task, that's for sure. So that's my thought with respect to those high level documents and or words, sorry, the principles in the vision statement, just because of my concern of how those words will impact our ability to on the implementation plan. So those are my thoughts. Does anybody else have any other thoughts? No? Colton, back over to you with the bit of feedback that we've given you.
Sure, certainly. Thank you, Mayor. I have, I think adding the word safe right in the vision statement is something we do immediately. I'm very happy and pleased to get some alternative words. I appreciate and understand your concern around in principle 4 saying ensure. Some options could be, you know, like you said, promote. That could be emphasize, strive for. So we'll put an alternative in there that's a little bit, as you say, less of a high bar. If that is the will of council, and similarly for principle 8, I think promote can work there instead of prioritize. So yeah. No concerns from my end on those changes, and I appreciate what you're trying to accomplish with those changes.
Thank you, Colt. Maybe you can, because we're not necessarily, you know, bound to it yet. We're having a discussion, and maybe you can give us some various opportunities or words that fit there, and we're gonna have a discussion later about which word we actually want to see there when the whole council's here. Okay,
yeah,
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Pleasure.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off there. That's not what I wanted to do. I was just thanking you for that point. So if you've got more, if you got more to say, please say it.
No, I was just responding to some options there. We can make sure that we provide those alternatives and work with your administration on words that they feel are comfortable. And those changes can be made quite quickly before we do any public engagement.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Also, to your point, Mayor, you said you haven't had a chance to look at the document, which is very understandable. It is a huge document, and of course, you would need more time to review that. But we are going to have a public engagement, and that is another opportunity to provide feedback during that time. So if you have had a chance to go through any section you are interested, or like entire document, please feel free to do so, and it would be a pleasure to gather some more feedback during that time.
Thank you, Rada. And I think we did receive an electronic copy of it a couple of weeks ago. I'll say I remember seeing it come through there. So I'll do my best to make it a priority in the next week or so to read through it.
Yeah, and then just as a process reminder, we'll be back after the engagement. It's still a draft. So there's another conversation with council and or committee of the whole. So there's a couple of opportunities here for some refinement and fine tuning before you have to lock it in as a bylaw.
Good. Thank you. Anything else from staff? Then I think we're finished the meeting for today. So again, thank you everybody for the hard work that you're putting into this. And I've done it before, so I recognize how big a task it is. It takes a lot of work from staff and, you know, to get out there with the public. And we saw you up there this summer, you know, asking people about it at various events. So thank you for putting in your time there. Thank you to the contractor, McElhaney, for putting everything together, and thanks to the council members who have participated on this, because it's a lot of meetings and a lot of work. So thank you. With that, we are adjourned for the day. Thanks.
Thank you.